Now, it's undeniable that Britain is suffering under a housing crisis. The year I was born, the average property in London cost over 3 times the average wage. Since then, despite a Great Recession and a global pandemic, it has soared to 11 times the average wage. Frankly, Britain needs more homes in the right places. But to achieve this, it needs homes that can carry community consent, that preserve the beauty of the country. Interestingly, a paper exploring some brownfield development in South Tottenham shows that this might be possible. Victorian terraced houses have been allowed to grow upwards, subject to a strict design code ensuring that extensions harmonise with the design of the existing building. We're looking at a picture of these extensions now. You'll be able to find it on the GBNews social media accounts as well. Well, joining me to talk about how this is possible, how it's been received and whether it could be rolled out to the rest of the country is Ben Southwood, a senior fellow at Policy Exchange and head of research at Create Streets. Welcome to the programme, Ben. First of all, how did this come about, this incredibly localised new rule in terms of expanding housing?
So it's partly the special needs of a specific community. So there's a thriving Haredi Jewish community in South Tottenham. In the area in which this rule applies, there was an average of 5.6 children per household, and they were crammed into these small Victorian 2-storey terraced houses, sometimes with 4 children per bedroom. And the community wasn't willing to move because most people, if they have lots of kids, they probably move out to the suburbs where land is cheaper and spread out a bit. But on Shabbat, they're not able to use any other form of transport other than walking, and they're only able to walk a certain distance. And that meant that they were unwilling to move away from synagogue and the other religious community elements. So what happened is local councillors were noticing they were putting up very ugly extensions. And also these extensions weren't adding that much space, perhaps a couple bedroom here or there. And they thought, well, maybe there's a win-win solution. So we can make the extensions look better so the rest of the community is happier. But we can also give them the ability to put more space on, as the Victorians themselves might have done. And it seems like that. So over a few years, Haringey Council worked on a design code. This strict design code came into place, saying what you can and can't do. And now all the extensions go in line with the design code. They tend to be bigger, so people are being able to spread out their kids. There have been reports of fewer behavioural issues, fewer issues at school because they've got more space, each of the children, for their own room, say, or at least sharing a room with one of their nearer siblings rather than 3 others. And it seems like one way in which you can make these houses bigger, add more bedrooms, but with community consent.
Now, it's interesting looking at South Tottenham and looking at those houses. It seems that they are built very well. It seems that you wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't Victorian looking at them. How do they achieve such a strict design code and actually such good implementation of that code?
Well, it's very interesting. So most design codes around the country will say quite vague things like there needs to be design excellence or things like that. And that means there's a lot of leeway for officers to take discretion over how that should be implemented and perhaps reflect their own preferences about design rather than necessarily the preferences of the communities that they have. What's been done in this one is very, very clear rules. Lots of pictures. This is what you can do. It's completely obvious. If, for example, there's a gable, the gable has to be copied up. If there's a brick decoration, a bit of brick ornament, so different coloured brick with a pattern, that has to be copied up. If you use these materials at the bottom, they have to be the same materials at the top. And all of those things mean that you can follow it very easily. And so then you can just get a builder to come in, builder knows what to do as long as the rules are clear.
And the win-win here is incredible because, of course, these extensions can cost around $100,000 to build, but the value they add to the house is so much more than that.
Yeah, so in some areas, obviously, in London, as you pointed out, there's a very specific circumstance for the UK. The shortage of housing is much tighter and South Tottenham is expensive even for London. So it's understandable here that if you give people the ability to add more to their property, it'd be worth a lot. That won't work everywhere, and this policy wouldn't work everywhere. I mean, for one thing, it's mostly designed for Victorian and Edwardian houses. You need a different policy for modern houses, and you need a different policy for older medieval or Georgian houses. But yeah, in this area, it's been able to add, I reckon, I did an estimate of how many bedrooms it's added, I reckon about 1,000, and this is a neighbourhood of only 8 to 10 streets, really. It's a pocket neighbourhood. And it's about 20% of the houses have done it so far since the policy's been in place.
Now, for our viewers on television, we can have a look at some of this design code that has been implemented in this street, and you can see this on social media if you're listening on the radio. Uniquely in this design code, it shows what you shouldn't do. It shows bad examples of ugly buildings that should be avoided. Is this something that could be replicated across the country?
I think pretty much all Victorian neighbourhoods could do something like this. Some of the very special ones with particularly exquisite architecture, maybe they want to take a longer time to work out, do we need to do this, blah, blah, blah. But in areas where land is expensive, housing is tight, and we don't want to just demolish the houses to make them bigger, we want community consent for smaller scale upgrades that benefit the people who are already living there, the existing residents. I think this is a good solution.
And what do you think are the prospects of this being rolled out? Is there any sort of leaning towards this in government?
I know that the government is looking for ways to do this kind of improvement. When Michael Gove was previously housing spokesperson in the 2000s, he said stuff like, we need to have carrots rather than sticks. We need to let people do more with their property rather than, wholesale gigantic developments without the consent of locals. And he retweeted my tweet on this paper, so hopefully that means he's interested.
Well, there we go. The Housing Secretary seeming to endorse that. Ben Southwood, thank you very much for joining us this morning.